What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're talking about shoulder mobility, and we're going to look at the 8 movements that your shoulder can move through. So when you look at these movements, you could use them as exercises if you feel like you're lacking mobility. You could also use them as a self-assessment. Maybe you've got pain in your shoulder or you've had an injury recently and you're wondering, do I have my full range of motion back? You can go through and watch these movements, watch how far I can move, and assess yourself and look for any major asymmetries or insufficiencies. If you see them, then that may be something you need to work on. So if those are questions you have, stay tuned for today's video. So for our first 2 movements, we're going to look at the sagittal plane of motion, which is our forward and back plane of motion. So we're going to look at flexion and extension. So I'm going to turn to the side so you can see these. So essentially flexion is reaching out to the front and up as high as you can. If we look at the normal for this one, you should basically be able to get all the way overhead or 180 degrees of movement. So 0 is straight down, and then our shoulders should go all the way up overhead. You can also do this with your back against a wall. So you can see, can you put your back against the wall, and then can your arm get all the way up? Okay, so that's our first one, flexion. Obviously really important for overhead tasks. Extension is with your elbow bent, you're going to reach your arm back. And with this one, again, 0 is the starting position. We should be able to get about 60 degrees of shoulder extension, which we need to reach behind us for different things, reaching back into the back seat of a car, things like that. So again, 180 degrees of flexion and 60 degrees of extension. All right, so now our next 2 movements are going to be in the frontal plane of motion, which is the side-to-side motion. So with our shoulder, we need to be able to go through abduction through 180 degrees. So again, like flexion, all the way overhead, super important for overhead tasks. So 180 degrees of abduction. And then adduction is one that we don't see as much limitation with, but basically the arm has to cross in front of the body like this. It's one, again, we don't dress too much because people tend to not have limitations there. So with the frontal plane, think mostly about abduction. Can I get 180 degrees actively like this with my shoulder? All right, so our last plane of motion is the transverse plane of motion, which is normally where we think about rotation occurring. In the shoulder, there's going to be 4 movements here. So the first ones are horizontal movements. So if I have my arm up like this, I'll have horizontal adduction, basically crossing across my body, which I need to wash my opposite armpit, scratch my shoulder. This is an area that when people have shoulder injuries, they often have a hard time reaching across the other side of their body. So we need to have horizontal adduction. So can I get my elbow across to kind of the center line of my body like this? And then horizontal abduction. So can I bring my arm back sort of behind my body? If it's here, can I abduct it back behind my body? Another really important one that sometimes people are limited when they're trying to reach out to the side of their body and overhead. They can't get their shoulder all the way back into horizontal abduction. Okay, so check those 2. So horizontal adduction and then that horizontal abduction. How far can I get my arm back here, at least in line with my trunk? Most people should be able to get it just behind their trunk a little bit. So our other 2 in the transverse plane are internal and external rotation or lateral medial rotation. You're going to start looking at this with your elbows against your side. For external rotation, I'm turning my arms out so my elbows stay pinned, just my shoulders are rotating. So for this, I should be able to get 70 degrees of external rotation. And then for internal rotation, I should be able to basically turn my arm in all the way to my stomach. So I should be able to do that easily. And then what I want to do, first I've got here elbows at my side. Then I'm going to move up to shoulders at 90 degrees. So for this one, for external rotation, I want to see that I can get my shoulder into 90 to 100 degrees of external rotation. This again is what I need to be able to reach all the way up and overhead when my arm is out to the side. So it combines that horizontal abduction from before and external rotation to get up like this. Okay, so then from here, this was our start position. We've got 90 degrees of external rotation. We also want to see about 70 degrees of internal rotation without lifting the shoulder blade. So you want to keep your shoulder blade kind of tucked down, and then you should be able to get about 70 degrees of internal rotation, which is necessary for us to be able to reach behind our back. So if you have 70 degrees of internal rotation, you should be able to reach behind your back pretty easily. That's another movement that we often see restricted in people who've had shoulder injuries. It hurts to get their arm behind their back or it feels tight. Okay, so look, These are the 8 movements that your shoulder can move through, and basically today's video shows active range of motion. This would be mobility exercises where you're using your muscles to actively move your joint through its available range of motion. They might seem really basic, but these are some of the exercises we start with shoulder patients when they've had an injury or they have pain. So before you start strengthening and wondering about strengthening exercises, start with these active mobility exercises and see if you can move through each movement through that full range of motion. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section and I'll get back to you guys. See you next time. Bye.